Namaste. Welcome to Be My Guest. My guest today is Mr. Krishna Gubili, an author and a TEDx presenter amongst other roles in his daily life. Welcome, Krishna, and congratulations on publishing your book and presenting TED Talks. I'm going to leave it to you now to introduce yourself, telling us more about you and maybe about the talk as well.
Namaste, good morning, and thanks Hamsha and the ActonTV team for giving me this opportunity to present the story. I'm a data analytics consultant by my profession. I live in Pennsylvania, but more importantly, my ancestor was one of the 1.3 million Indians who were sent off as sugarcane coolies to British colonies a couple of hundred years ago. Now, my book, my TED Talk was about sugar slavery in the past and how it connects to modern day slavery. That was the connection I was trying to bring about.
You call them coolies, and I know in South Africa also they call them coolies. And where did the name, where did that word derive again?
So, coolie in the literal sense came from Tamil. Which
the language Tamil.
The language Tamil spoken in the southern part of India, which literally means work done by manual labor, and because of sugarcane slavery, this word probably became more popular. And in different parts of the indenture colonies, so if you went to Trinidad, they were called as Gladstone coolies. In South Africa, they would use the word Sami and coolie. In Fiji and Mauritius, Girmitya and other words. But to me, all these coolies, this 1.3 million, whether it was Trinidad or South Africa or Mauritius, they were all bound by the same fate. They were ship brothers. So that's one interesting part. They used to be called as Jihaji Bhai, as in ship brothers.
So I am one of the descendants of that.
Yeah.
When we look at the history, we're very sad for them. But when we look to where they've come, I am now the direct descendant of that. And I think I'm grateful for the life I'm leading for now.
Yeah.
So do tell us about your book and how you came about that topic as well.
Okay. I grew up in Hyderabad in South India. And when I was a child, my grandmother, like most grandmothers, she would tell a lot of stories. So one story was about her husband, who unfortunately died young. So she would say, your grandfather would sit cross-legged like this. She made me do this when I was a child. And she said, your grandfather was handsome. He was educated in South Africa. He had great handwriting. And all we had was one photograph of my grandfather. And there were stories about my great-grandfather. So my grandmother would say, your great-grandfather spoke about Natal and Durban, some places in South Africa, and he would miss those places. And she said he worked hard all his life, but he died a poor man. And one interesting story was, she would say, your great-grandfather used to say Gandhiji was a great man, and he met him there. And then there was yet another interesting story about my grandfather's sister. So my great-grandfather had 6 sons and 1 daughter, and that one daughter stayed back in South Africa. So I would wonder as to why did only one daughter, she stays back in South Africa. I have some part of my family there, but we had no connection.
Right.
So this is how I grew up, thinking as to what is this connection between South Africa, my great-grandfather. There is some part of my family there, but I can't make sense out of it.
Right.
And all I have is my grandmother telling me the stories. And in my 20s, I start becoming serious that, okay, this is more than my family tree project.
Right.
So I start writing to embassies, trying to find my great-grandfather.
Right.
So there was this person in the South African embassy who passed this email of mine to a researcher in South Africa. And that researcher, Hamsha, said, Krishna, it is very difficult to get information about indentured coolies. And that was the first time I heard that word, indentured coolie. And then I go online, and what I read shook me up, right? I realized for the first time that 1.3 million, right, 1.3 million Indians get shipped off as indentured labor, no history lessons, and I'm reading that, and one night I'm thinking about these coolies, my great grandfather, and then thunder struck me, Hamsha. That night I realized my ancestor was one of them. The timelines when he seemed to have gone to South Africa, when Gandhiji was there, this indenture all lined up, and then I cried for him. And from then on, this was no longer a family tree project. I said, I have to find my ancestor. So this is who he was, and this is who I am. So this became more of finding my roots, a quest which started as a teenager, and that search took about 20 plus years, going through ship lists and databases. I was trying to write to the researchers now, saying now I have to find him, and they would say, are you clear that these are all coolies who were put on ships, they came here, and their life was just like those of slaves that they were replacing. And about 5 years ago, in December, it was more of a miracle that I found the original ship record of my ancestor. And
so yes, in South Africa they have archives, and they've done a good job, and that's when they started looking at all this details as to where everybody came to, and people like Dr. Ghulam Vaid and Ashwin Tikamji, where all the people that really did much research and actually written a book on indentured laborers.
Oh yeah, so Ghulam Vaid is my inspiration, and he gave a nice review. He read my book as well. So Ghulam Vaid and Ashwin wrote this book called Inside Indian Indenture.
Yes.
That was one of the Bibles. That is a book I referred to a lot for my research.
And Dr. Fatima Mir, inspirational woman that, all these people really brought research.
Oh yeah, so Dr. Bhana did so much work on this ship list. Otherwise, when in this search, right, it was sad. I went to India, to Madras, Chennai. So from India, there were two ports, okay, Calcutta and Madras, from where they shipped 1.3 million.
Right.
Which means, in about 60 years, you had 500 Indians getting shipped off every week.
Right.
500 Indians every week. And guess the number of records we have in India? It's 0.
Oh, wow.
So I tried, went to Madras, to Chennai, and then I couldn't find anything. And then I keep looking on site. So in South Africa, in the archives in Durban or Maritzburg, they have done a phenomenal job. Thanks so much to Dr. Bhana and his team to at least digitize some of the records.
Right, yes. In Pietermaritzburg, it was where we always had all records kept, and everybody did arrive in the port of Natal, KwaZulu-Natal.
Yeah.
But it is a very big port, and that's where sugarcane plantations happened.
Correct, the sugar capital. Yeah.
Yes, and my childhood, my mom still lives there. The house I was born was right alongside the sugarcane fields.
Oh, wow.
But it was a very good neighborhood in a place called Tongaat.
Okay, Tongaat has sweet memories. So part of my family is in Tongaat. So in 2014, when by 2014, after 25 years of looking, I gave up.
Right.
I couldn't find my ancestor. I was very sad and empty from inside, because all my life, all I wanted to know was what happened to him. So in 2014, I went to South Africa. I had a 4-day ticket, and I just had one address in Tongaat. So I went, met this far-off relative, and the next day I go to Maritzburg archive. So there it was the miracle where I found the ship record. And Tongaat is such a beautiful place. I mean,
it is. I was blessed to be brought up in a beautiful, scenic Tongaat.
The drive from Tongaat to Durban, the ocean drive, is still etched in my memory. It's one of the most beautiful drives ever.
Yes, but the word coolie is actually very derogatory in South Africa. Indians don't like the word, and you use it quite frequently. But I guess it is to describe what we were.
It was very sad. So in the book, so even in the American literature, right? So the words like nigger and so on are the sad words, and so coolie in this context, even Gandhiji keeps saying, and that's the word that would hurt you the most. So I tried to, as much as possible, stay away from that word. And in this whole search, what I found is because of the coolie women, right? To me, they are the real heroes, Hamsha.
Yes.
The women, right?
Yes.
Because imagine 200 years ago, little education, no occupational skills, but these women, they go to a land where everything is new, you know, the sights, the smell, the sound, the food, but they have to settle down, raise a family, and they have to overcome such great odds, right? So that exploitation, right from the depots in India to the ship to the farms, and because of them, now you have this vibrant Indian community, right? So you've got about 4.5 million Indians in all these colonies. So to me, they are the real heroes.
Oh,
you know,
yes.
in
Oh,
this
yes.
journey
You know,
where
they
fought
say
so hard. Yeah.
you put a woman anywhere and she'll really do wonders, right? And that's perfect example. But you know, getting back to the actual book, and this is now your story.
Yeah.
It's yes, it's a Indian South African story, but it's you are writing. This is your personal journey. Am I right?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful story written.
Thank
you know,
you.
yeah. So. And yes, now getting back now that you got to South Africa, you got to find your family, and how did you feel? And
that was something I never found the right words to explain.
Express that.
Because in the Indian side of the family, we knew that we have family there. In the South African side, my aunt, who is now 76, when the first time I met her, she was crying and she was saying, you know, all my life, I just wanted to meet somebody from my mom's side. So there were people trying from both sides of the ocean. We can't meet, and it was more of a blessing that I can say that, you know, I found my family.
Right.
So my father met his first cousin when both of them were in their 70s.
oh, okay.
So my dad is a heart patient, and I was worried as to, you know, how he would feel. So he was so overwhelmed, you know, so he couldn't even speak. So for the first half an hour, my father and his first cousin, they just cried.
So you've taken your dad to South Africa?
Yeah, so in 2015 we did a reunion.
Right.
So in Tongaat, and then he met family in Durban. We have family in Cape Town. We have family in Johannesburg, and
The family grew.
The family grew. So now I've got nieces, nephews on the India side. So with the family from South Africa, some of them visited India, some of them visited the US. So at last, now everybody is united.
Right.
But how it came about is more of a miracle. I mean, I never thought I could get there. Yeah.
So what I did actually find out right at the beginning was, you know, why did your grandfather leave India in the first place? What was the conditions in India that prompted him to leave to South Africa? Because growing up, all we learned is, we heard, not learned. This is not true facts. That they said that the pavements of Johannesburg was full of gold, and the offerings for gold, you know, you go over and you'll be well off. But you tell me exactly, as you know, the story of why your grandfather left India at that time, and why so many decided to leave anyway.
Yeah, that
think
was one of the drivers for writing the book, because, you know, after I found my ancestor and then my family, I realized very few people have heard of Indian indenture. There's no history lessons, and very few people understand the connection between sugar slavery and Indian indenture.
Right.
So in modern day, you had slavery from say 1440s till 1830s. During which you had about 11 million people taken from Africa. So more than 11 million people were taken from Africa as slaves, as most people would know in the movies and so on, right? And most of them went to work on sugarcane. More than 60% of the modern day slavery happened because of sugarcane.
Right.
So these slaves, they were all taken to Caribbean, Brazil, and in 1830, in the British Empire, they abolished slavery. They said no more slavery. So by that time, sugarcane was growing in the Caribbean, so West Indies, South Africa, and Mauritius, you know, big places. And the plantation owners, they petitioned the British government saying, now you're taking the slaves away, so now give us the replacement. Give us lot of labor, because sugarcane is a manual intensive
Yes.
labor.
Oh yes, I
industry.
can still I picture the cutting of the cane and packing,
No,
just because we
it's all
lived right
manual.
across from the
Fields,
sugarcane
right, yeah.
field. I told
So
you.
the plantation owners told the British government, now you have to give us lot of labor and almost free. So then they start this thing called indenture. So indenture technically means an agreement. So these people would go. So in India, by that time, if you look back, the British government was ruling India since 1757, but technically speaking around in 1857, after the rebellion, the British government takes over, but before that for about 150 years the East India Company ruled India.
Right.
Yes. So and because of their taxation policies, they killed the local industry, and just within say 50 to 60 years between 1760 to 1830, in 5 famines you had 35 million Indians who died. So a lot of people dying because of famines, and the British government, all they cared about is their taxes. So you had millions of Indians who were struggling just to find food.
So this is in India.
In India, right? So when we look at from outside, you had a lot of demand for sugar, lot of demand for sugarcane labor in these colonies, and in India you had the perfect conditions where a lot of people in penury. My great grandfather was probably one of them. And what happened is these people would go, and the recruiters, right, the term they use is called arkati. So these people would go to towns and villages and promise people that there is a lot of money to be made, very easy work, and they would say you would get 5 rupees a month. So I wrote in the book, so my great grandfather, so I as part of the research I went through all these numbers, and I realized making 5 rupees a month was like a dream.
Lot of money.
Lot of money. So even my great grandfather would have thought 5 rupees is a crazy number, but these arkatis would not tell them what exactly is the work, how far are they going. Very few people knew that they are crossing the ocean. Because in India at that point of time, crossing the ocean was meant as a sin, right? It was called kalapani. If you cross the ocean, you lose your caste. So these people did not even know that they are crossing the ocean, what were the terms and conditions. All they would say is there is a lot of money, easy work, and they would put your thumbprint on this agreement, and then they would put you on the ship.
Right, because they didn't read at that time, especially in English, because everybody spoke their mother tongue, whichever.
Correct. So all these people are simple people. So in my mind, people, did they have the necessity for work? Yes, but did they really understand what they're getting into? The answer is no. So it was more coercion and deception, and once they put them in a depot, so what they would do is you would get people from small villages, make them walk for a day, 2 days, 3 days, put them in this large depots or buildings with fences, and they would lock you up, because they didn't want these coolies to escape, because they would go back to the villages and tell them that this scheme is not true, and then they would put you on the ship, and once you're on the ship you can't escape, and once you get down from the ship you are locked in the farm. So the sad part, Hamsha, is most of the coolies, almost 80% of the coolies apparently did not see anything outside the farm.
At that time, I would have called them more Indians than coolies, because they didn't know that's what they're
getting into. So once they get in locked up, these indentured Indians, my great grandfather included, they would work 12 to 14 hours a day. Any mistakes, you would get whipped, and if the sardars and the managers didn't like you, they would say, okay, you didn't finish your quota of work, so this week no work, no
wages, no salary.
And that is how they would work, 3 years, 5 years, and then again they would say, we have to get paid for your ship ticket, right? And technically, as part of the agreement, the company was supposed to pay for that. But how many of these people would understand? So that is a
especially as far in English. But the rule at that time was that way anyway, right?
So then again, you would get re-indentured for the next 5 years, and so on and so forth. So that's how it went.
Right, and in South Africa, I think they make it known as the arrival 1860. November 1860. So every November we have remembrance of arrival to South Africa. So
that was the original title for my book, the title of the book was SS Truro.
Uh-huh.
Truro was the first
Yes.
ship that took these people. So I started writing in 2014, and till late 2018, the title of the book was SS Truro. And then we had to change the title.
Why did you have to change the title?
Yeah, so what I did is,
There is a book already, SS Truro, I know that.
yeah, so and then I thought, this is Truro. To me, it was the symbol of Indians leaving from India to South Africa. But then, after the book got ready, I sent it to a lot of people, and I said to my friends, and said, give me some feedback on the title. They said, Krishna, it's a nice story. It is your story. It is about your lifelong search for your ancestor, and who is part of the indenture, the sugar indenture. And they said, but the title is, it's not telling that.
Right.
So then we spent a lot of time, and I said, okay, why don't we name the book after my ancestor?
Your great-grandfather.
So his name was Viriah. So that's how the title came about.
Okay, so what is his full name as registered
Yeah,
by the South Africans at that time?
At that time, it was Viriah Gubili.
Okay.
So the spelling in Telugu, right, the way we would write it's more Viriah.
Yes.
But in the register, it was written as Viriah.
That's
So-
the interesting part is my grandfather's name is Viriah.
I came to that, yes.
And it's Veeriah.
Yeah.
But it's how they would spell it at the time of registration.
Okay, that's an interesting story. So during this search, right, I got this ship list. So from India, you had 152,184 people who went. So I prepared the list of all these coolies, and I would start searching. So my grandmother would say, your great grandfather's name was Viriah. So then this researcher said, Krishna, now imagine this, 4 months in a ship in the lower deck with 400-500 other coolies. By the time you land, you are just happy that you are able to breathe some fresh air. It is so unhygienic and very filthy in the ship. And there you would have the officer who is asking you, okay, what is your name? Now, this person would not even understand what they are asking.
Yes.
Half the time the interpreter would not be there. So they would say something, and the officer would write as to how he heard.
Exactly.
So I knew the spelling mistakes crept in. So for a lot of time, I would search for all the variations, like Veeriah. So if I found a name, then I would write to the researchers, is he my ancestor?
Right.
So they would wait for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Then they would say, Krishna, no, this person had 3 children. I said, no, my ancestor had 6. So I searched for a lot of variations of that name, and in the register, this is how it was spelled.
So this is truly a labor of love, and I know I could go on and on talking about this book, and because like I said, it's where I've come from. It's part of actually today. My ancestors left from India to South Africa, and my husband and I, with our children, left from South Africa to the U.S. What is your message to our audience from all of this?
So after I wrote the book, we did about 15 book readings in the country, so from Boston to Toronto to Chicago, and the toughest questions came from the youngest in the audience. So they're asking, Krishna, so what can we do? What should we do? So the message is that there are millions of people out there living and working in conditions that we cannot imagine, just because we need some conveniences, whether it is sugar or smartphones or sweatshirts. So in phones, you have lithium-ion batteries. All batteries need cobalt. So if people want to switch a phone every year, it means billions of more phones, so more batteries. So cobalt mining in Congo again is a tragedy where you have modern day slavery. You have hundreds and thousands of young children as young as 6. They dig the earth with bare hands. You have people in Bangladesh who work 12 to 14 hours every day just because you want to have 60 garments. So on average, in the US, everybody has about 60 plus garments in a year. So you want more garments, it means people are working more hours for the same amount or less amount of money in conditions that you're not aware of. So my ancestor went for sugarcane slavery because people wanted sugar in everything, so tea, coffee and desserts and ice creams. So you want these conveniences, but there are a lot of people out there paying for it. So we should all be conscious that, what are the choices we are making and we are indirectly impacting the lives of a lot of people out there.
Right. There's a couple ways of looking at it, and you're very right. Some people need jobs, and this is the way they do it. So it's a vicious circle that we go through.
Correct.
And sugar is something we shouldn't be eating anyway. It's not good for oneself.
Yes, correct. And at least decrease it, right? So you have companies like Fairphone or cleanclothes.org. They are saying you should have garments, but look at companies which do more healthy sourcing, which are more transparent. At the end of the day, my ask is, now can we treat these laborers as human beings?
Oh yes.
Just smile at them. So, fair trade. Just treat them normally. That's all my request is.
Yeah.
So this is probably the toughest part of the book that I had to write, because this is how my ancestor and the Indians, they lived on these farms. So my great grandfather is on this sugarcane farm, and it rained incessantly all day, and the coolies were at work with little protection from nature's elements. Drenched to the bone, they returned to the barracks to find that the firewood was wet, which meant only cold mealies to satisfy their hunger. The next morning, Viriah woke up feeling as if his body was on fire and shivered like a thin leaf on a stormy night. The leaky roof let in a steady stream of raindrops. He was too weak to move, and as he lay there, he missed his mother more than ever. He remembered how she would raise a fit when he caught a cold as a child. During the rainy season, young Viriah would play with his friends all day long and usually returned home thoroughly wet and shivering. Papamma, his mother, would quickly make hot kashayam. It's an Indian home remedy for colds, by boiling milk and sprinkling in turmeric, black pepper, ginger, cloves and cumin. She would serve it to Viriah with tender love, pleading with him not to play in the rain for so long. Then she would scold the rain for not stopping all day and for troubling her love, which would delight Viriah, who would already been thinking of the games for the next day. Teary-eyed, Viriah felt his mother's warm kashayam in his throat, and he gulped empty air, remembering her feeding him. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for driving all the way, coming over and being my guest today. It was quite encouraging. And I know you're going to have many, many more people wanting to find out as you did. And I can see this is truly a labor of love.
No, thank you. This has been a good journey. So special thanks to my family. So they paid a heavy price with this whole search because of the time it took. And I did meet a lot of Indians who are trying to find their roots back.
Right.
So, and that is the next part of my journey.
So how is your book available? Can anybody get it? And
so the book is available on Amazon and iBooks, and they can just search for Viriah, and so it's as a online version and the soft copy and hard copy as well, so anywhere in the world.
Are you making an Audible version soon?
Yeah, so
you're working on that?
Yes, I'm working on an audio version as well. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have a website that people can reach you at?
Oh, yes, so I built a website, and there I'm trying to put more material. I mean, the articles from Ghulam Wahid or Uma Mestri,
Ashwin,
and so on, and Ashwin,
yes,
and Dr.
Fatima
Bijlal.
Mir,
So
yes.
the website is same. It's viriah.com.
Okay.
So some passages from my book, some pictures from this book readings, and more importantly, articles about the modern day slavery as well.
I actually have a couple books at home also. That was some research has been done in the local universities, like University of KwaZulu-Natal at that time, as it was known.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of people that actually listed the names of the ship and who came in that and all of that also. So there's many people that have of Indian descent have been researching and looking into it. And yes, there's lots more information. And yes, we as an Indian population has a very interesting story and how we got there, and we survived.
And we grew up. So we thrived and we grew up.
The biggest thing for any Indian, as I know it, is education.
Yes, I'm sure.
So as togetherness, they got together into groups, lived in barracks, whatever the hardships were, they still make sure they save their money for their children to be educated, so people like us can live better lives that we do today.
Very important, Amsha, right? So when you look at these people about 150 years ago, they are working in the hardest of circumstances, but across the colonies, so whether it's South Africa or Guyana or Mauritius, it's the same thing, that they invested in education, and that's one of the reasons why we are here.
Yes, and South Africa has lots of doctors, lawyers, teachers, and almost all children are really highly educated.
Yeah.
And it's, indirectly thanks to our background and our wanting to learn.
Absolutely. I think that's a common thread I found. So whether it's a V.S. Naipaul, he wins a Nobel Prize from Trinidad, or a Professor Dr. Brijlal from Fiji, and that seems to be the underlying common thread. Yeah.
And thank you so much again.
And my pleasure. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. And always available, ActonTV.org or YouTube channel anywhere in the country. And from your host, Hamsha Naidu, thank you. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.